This video was written by What If Football, a link to his channel will be in the description below. Leeches, rats, cockroaches, the Glazers are synonymous with high interest rates, debts anchored to the club, and relentless dividends. Sir Alex Ferguson patched over the toxic takeover at Old Trafford because he was a once-in-a-lifetime manager. David Gill helped people forget the ominous owners in the background because of his experience in the transfer market, as well as his relationship with the manager. Whether it was David Gill's successor, a Glazer-endorsed yes-man banker called Ed Woodward, who reduced Manchester United to a laughingstock in the transfer windows, or spending way over the odds for unsuitable players, the Glazers have clearly been at the club's detriment, certainly when it comes to the recruitment department. But before I go any further, remember to subscribe to the channel and check out my Patreon podcast, which will be linked below. But also, if you want cheap, good quality football jerseys for the new season, or retro jerseys from the past 40 years, then check out jerseyfifa.com, a link will be in my Instagram bio, and if you use coupon code Atlantis, you should get a discount as well. I'll leave my Instagram at the top of the description and comment section, and a link will be in my Instagram bio. Despite qualifying back into the Champions League, United are restricted to a net spend of around £100 million, whilst those in the same boat or even in lesser European competitions like Aston Villa seem to be able to run free into the market with a degree of reckless abandonment. With the club now reaching that net spend to bring Mason Mount and Andre Onana in, they have plunged to desperate measures to sign the third target Rasmus Højlund, with a player plus cash deal that was firmly rejected by Atalanta. United are shackled to stringent budgets in order to adhere to FFP, the same Manchester United who stood proudly, chest out with every passing week when new commercial opportunities were afforded them. It was supposed to be Ed Woodward's saving grace. Rasmus Højlund, it has to be remembered, is only a target because Harry Kane is out of Manchester United's financial reach this year. Such is the mood shift and the intelligence of Erik ten Hag that he nipped a potential move in the bud for Kane, armed with instant knowledge that the club would be marooned with yet another saga in the transfer market. Ander Herrera was the first example of the Glazers and Ed Woodward combining to create an absolute shambles in the transfer market, with his signing being postponed by a whole year. Jadon Sancho too, clocked in at well over a year before the deal was actually done from when the rumours actually started, and Bruno Fernandes was a signature that ought to have been sealed inside one transfer window, but ultimately was spilled into a second, and the deal eventually got done midway through the season in January. Erik ten Hag got a sniff of that mould left behind by a Manchester United transfer saga from last summer. He wanted Frankie de Jong, and it was only after 2 months of solid work that he was forced to pull the plug, with names such as Marko Arnautovic and Adrian Rabiot tossed wildly into the void in retaliation. And Frankie de Jong is just another name to add to the list of failed United acquisitions under the Glazer ownership. The only reason Jude Bellingham and Erling Haaland weren't subjected to proactive Manchester United sagas was because they were properly represented by family members who had been around the block. Both players seemed to shun the circus of Manchester United to join Borussia Dortmund instead, just as Jurgen Klopp did when he ought to have joined United from Borussia Dortmund as manager. All three were available, cheap and armed with the ability to build an empire at United. They were shown the creaking facilities, the revolving door of managers and the bumbling Ed Woodward, and with the club being likened to Disneyland, it proved enough to repel Klopp. However, the German manager would eventually find himself in the northwest, allied with a clear-thinking hierarchy who had a defined list of targets that were not only available to get but would also fit the system. And at Liverpool, Klopp would go on to win everything there was to win, heralding a new era for United's greatest rivals, as Ed Woodward wandered through the dense forest of transfer conjecture, with his blindfold cutting through United's foggy strategy. In an age where even teams that competed in the Papa John's Trophy employed a director of football, the Glazers entrusted football operations to a banker. By the 2020s, the excitement was drained. If a player was to come to the club, he would have to be exceptional to stoke any flames inside the dead United supporters' hearts. Old Trafford had grown suspicious of any incomings. If it wasn't signed over a 12-month bantering process between a clueless banker in an office 200 miles away from the stadium and a savvy football operator, then he likely wasn't worth it. £35 million, for example, was lobbed at Donny van de Beek in times where people still queued to get into supermarkets in the pandemic. And this erratic splurge of money was pretty much needless, given that 9 months prior Bruno Fernandes had been signed in the same number 10 position, which meant that van de Beek was coming into a squad where there wasn't a designated place for him to come into the starting 11. But Ed Woodward's looming shadow really began with a trademark saga with Tony Cruz, when both him and David Moyes took their respective positions to chase the German midfielder, which remained arguably one of the most galling failures in a litany of them. Cruz was signed, sealed and all but delivered. He was since revealed that the contract was basically done until David Moyes received the boot and Louis van Gaal took over. Woodward, being an omnipresent blot on the club, might have continued the deal, but ultimately bowed to the manager and Real Madrid swooped in during the World Cup to take Tony Cruz, and look how that turned out. Even though Sir Alex Ferguson had retired, the club still behaved as though he was in the hot seat. That can be the only justification for a club with a scouting and recruitment department to simply drop all contact with a world-class player for an incoming manager on no notice. But this is a system that is workable in the modern day, certainly when the manager has such control and confidence with the club like Ferguson did. But even Pep Guardiola and Jurgen Klopp are successful because of a clear defined recruitment strategy above them that doesn't allow the responsibility to lie solely with the manager. Ed Woodward's greatest hits came thick and fast in the summer of 2013, with the Gareth Bale transfer being a great pillar for his incompetence. First, the club tried to simply throw money at him, offering more than what Real Madrid offered, and had a helicopter on standby, ready in case they were able to sway the Welshman up north. Safe to say it didn't work, but the saga had a disappointing sequel. 7 years in, 4 managers deep, United tried again for Bale. Now out of favour at Real Madrid, he would instead decide to rejoin Tottenham after Woodward became too distracted with the next great saga, which was Jadon Sancho. It goes on and on. Moyes also wanted Thiago and Cesc Fabregas, and he had to fall back on Marouane Fellaini. He couldn't even get his old buddy Leighton Baines to join the club, parried by Everton in negotiations, and when that failed, Fabio Contral's desperate loan deal from Real Madrid in the final minutes of the window was scuppered by the transfer deadline. And so the Glazers pivoted from that horror show of a transfer window and gave Louis van Gaal the world. They blew their wad across 2 summers that temporarily excited fans, but soon enough it became evident that this big spend, buy frequently approach didn't work. The summer of 2014 spending proved that United were just as inadequate at actually spending the money as they were when they were just trying to spend the money. In a team already stocked with Robin van Persie, Juan Mata and Wayne Rooney, fans spent the summer salivating. People were bending over backwards trying to cram Angel Di Maria and Radamel Falcao into the 3-5-2 that Louis van Gaal apparently preferred. But then the Glazers changed tact again, promising their third manager Jose Mourinho that they could do things in the transfer market that other clubs could only dream of. They then broke the world transfer record to sign a player that arguably the club didn't need and couldn't find a use for, and was clearly incompatible with the manager, with that player being Paul Pogba. When that wasn't working, they simply pulled up the drawbridge on Mourinho, denying him access to Toby Alderweireld, Matthias de Ligt and Harry Maguire, which led to the Portuguese manager not really being able to fix the problem area of central defence. And that might have been a sound strategy had the hierarchy continued this newfound stringent approach in the market to find only the most suitable and the best players for the club. Then they spunked £80 million on one of those Jose Mourinho targets, Harry Maguire, but of course only after Mourinho had departed the club. But under Solskjaer, United had finally got a whiff of a transfer strategy, buying young and homegrown in Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Jadon Sancho and Dan James, alongside the experience of Rafael Varane. They were now the focused, bloodthirsty wolf of the transfer market, until Cristiano Ronaldo turned up, after looking set for Manchester City, and the club turned into a domesticated Labrador. Distracted by chasing the flash-up light on the wall, it set the club back a couple of years and cost another manager his job. And now the supporters of the club are left bereft over one last Glazer family deal that has taken an eon to complete, the sale of the actual club. Fans, the manager, the players, and even prospective buyers are left completely in the dark as the owners continue to drag their feet like never before.